Welcome everyone to Hong Kong, where we have the clash between Shant Sargsyan and Magnus Carlsen. Shant is a talented youngster from Armenia and he's playing for this team named Sky Chess here in Hong Kong at the FIDE World Rapid Team Championships. And Sky Chess has been quite a revelation in this tournament. They've played really well. In fact, the team has outperformed their seeding. There is Aram Hakobian on board too. There is Andrew Hong, Muhammad Zokid Suyarov, who is a very very strong IM, maybe the strongest IM in the world currently. They have Gulruk Begim Tokir Janova. So a good team, but they take on the mighty WR Chess now. And Shant has a very big task in front of him. He has to face the goat of chess, Magnus Carlsen. Now, Magnus hasn't been in great shape. He lost his previous round to Arjun Erigaisi here, and so he arrives all raring for a revenge. And it's 15 minutes plus 10 seconds increment. Magnus has the black pieces here. And let's see how he fares. Shant is rated around 2600 in classical chess as well. And he's someone who's always trying to improve as a player. Pawn to e4. And we have the Sicilian. Knight f3. Magnus showing his intentions that he wants to go for a fight. And he's thinking about which Sicilian to choose. He goes d6. Pawn to d4. Pawn takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Knight comes out to f6. We have knight to c3. And Magnus chooses the Najdorf with a6. The bishop comes to d3. So, this line is getting popular slowly. Bishop d3. And now the bishop comes to e3. Magnus has gone for this dragon setup with bishop g7. He brings his knight out to c6. There could be ideas of knight g4. So f3 is played. And now Magnus plays something slightly offbeat. He goes h5. I mean, g4 wasn't really on the cards, was it, once you put your bishop on d3. Queen d2, Magnus quickly takes it. Bishop takes and goes bishop h6. Kind of a new concept, I must say. You can bring your bishop back to e3 to trade it, but we have Shant who plays queen f2. e5 is a possible move now because bishop f6, ef6, you don't want your structure to be spoiled. So e5 played. This creates a very interesting new imbalance in the position, which is that the d5 square is now weak and the d6 pawn is weak. But Magnus has the control of this important diagonal. Shant takes control of d5, bishop e6 instantly challenged. So bishop takes e6 is possible. He drops back. Magnus goes rook c8. He's playing quickly. He's trying to put pressure on his opponent. Shant brings his rook to d1. Naturally, he couldn't long castle with this bishop standing here. Rook d1 putting pressure on d6. King f8 to get the king to g7. And white short castles. King to g7 played. The position is pleasant for white. All the pieces are well positioned. Rook is coming to d1 to double here. So Magnus has kind of not a very happy task here playing, because also the bishop is controlling the d8 square. Rook comes to d1. It takes on b3. Now ab3 is the most natural way to continue, but Shant decides to take with cb3. And maybe he doesn't want the c2 pawn to remain a weakness when the knight jumps in. So that could be the reason. h4 played to gain some space. b4. Shant starts playing on the queen side. Now h3 is a very typical Magnus-like move. But he doesn't play it. He plays bishop f4. And now bishop e3. Magnus trades. Queen takes e3. Shant has played this quite solidly, and a draw should be the most likely result from this position. But naturally, after losing to Arjun in the previous game, Magnus would be quite ambitious here. a3 played. Solid chess by white. queen to c7, and now king f1 played. He brings back the queen to e7. Maybe Shant can repeat with king g1, but it could also be possible that Shant is ambitious. He goes queen g5, putting this nice dynamic of the queens looking at each other with the knight, and d5. Magnus so alert, because now the knight will take the pawn and the queen would be hanging. So he gets rid of this weakness in a very clever way by playing this. And if queen takes e7, knight takes e7 here, and black seems to have equalized, although I must say there is a small pressure on the e pawn. The rooks are more active, so it's not yet 100% equal. Now king f2, slowly improving the position, and Shant plays it king f2. I like how he's playing here, really. Knight e4, knight c5 on the cards. Okay, you have to be alert of rook c2 move, knight to c8, and now knight to e4. The knight is looking here, 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 and here, and he goes knight b6, because if rook c2 check, rook e2 was playable. So knight b6 played by Magnus, knight to c5, attacking the pawn on a6. You can go knight c4. It's incredible that in such an equal endgame, there's so much tension still on the board. b3, the a3 pawn hangs, so he simply goes rook e2, calmly defending the pawn on b2. a5, a nice little move, because if ba5, you lose your knight on c5. Shant jumps in with his rook to d7, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. He's not worried about the doubled pawns. In fact, now it gives him an opportunity to push the knight away with b3. Rook f5 played. And now Shant is thinking what to do. There are many interesting possibilities. He goes b3, and knight b6 is the best move here to attack the rook on d7. He goes knight d6, but now white can actually play g4, and after hg, the threat is g4, and you will lose the e5 pawn. So g4 is a very powerful move here. In fact, it gives white a big edge, but Shant doesn't play it. He goes rook d2, he attacks the knight on d6, and Magnus is back in the game. He brings his rook back to f6 to defend the knight. Shant Sargsyan now has to continue. Magnus has outplayed so many opponents from such equal positions. The e5 pawn under pressure. One way to play now is to take, go knight e4 and play this with h3, but it's very specific. So he goes rook f4, so that if you take here, he wants to take on b4, take on e5, take on b4, and okay, the b3 pawn is a bit loose, but the knight defends it. My rook defends the knight, so everything seems protected. Rook d5, attacking the knight on d6. Knight goes to f5, and now g4 played, gaining some space there. Magnus takes on g3, hg3, and rook c8 played. Shant plays his rook to d3, calmly bringing up the rook, defending the b3 pawn. Knight comes back to e7, now attacking the rook here. If you move the rook, the knight is hanging, so he goes rook d7. Trade, that should be equal. And Magnus blunders with knight c6, because now knight a6 and the rook is trapped. Let's see if Shant can find this. Magnus, look at his expression always. He spots the blunder before his opponent often. And Shant has seen it, knight a6, and look at that. That is a look of a man who's just simply missed a very simple move. The rook has no squares left, it's trapped, and even to the greatest player of all time, chessboard is not something where you can relax. There are blunders all out there waiting to be made, and Magnus blunders big time. Shant Sargsyan now exchange up without any compensation, and it's actually so winning here. Magnus doesn't even know what to do. Does he have to continue playing such a position where rooks are doubling down, rook b7, everything's weak for black, knight comes back to c6, g4 by Shant, making some space for his king to come to the g3 square, b4, and now king to g3. He goes pawn to g5. And now rook d6 attacking the knight. The knight hardly has any squares left to go to. He goes back knight d8, but now rook e8 should do the job as the knight is pinned and it will simply be won. And he plays it. Magnus resigns. Shant Sargsyan beats Magnus Carlsen. Quite a nice win for him. He played really well. He kept the pressure on Magnus, but in the end, Magnus could have drawn the game, instead tried to push too hard and got his own rook trapped. It happens to the best in the business. Congratulations to Shant.
Freedom begins with a choice. In 2008, we made ours. Freedom knows no borders. Step by step, we became part of the global financial system. In 2019, we went public on NASDAQ. In 2024, we built a digital ecosystem. Fintech, lifestyle, telecom, everything comes together in one unified digital space. Today, freedom is a system that shapes markets. $2 billion in annual revenue, $9.3 billion market capitalization, 11 million customers, 11,300 plus employees, 230 offices worldwide. Freedom begins with a choice, and every day we make it again. Freedom Holding Corp. One ecosystem, many possibilities.